I could still hear my mother's voice echoing in my ears, trembling with anger and frustration as she glared at me, as though I were the source of all that was wrong in her world. My mother's raised voice cut through the living room, slicing the festive atmosphere to shreds. Don't you dare try to take away your sister's accomplishment. This isn't about you, Naomi. Her tone was final, brimming with an unmistakable fury, and though I stood there, my cheeks burning, my hands shaking, some part of me wasn't surprised. I'd been caught in these crosshairs before, accusations of jealousy, bitterness, ingratitude. This was just another tally on a long record of being the difficult daughter. Across the room, my younger sister, Daphne, stood wearing that careful mask of surprise and innocence. She looked at me as if she had no idea why Mom was so upset, as if I'd manufactured the entire confrontation out of some pathetic need for attention. And behind her, my father frowned, uncertain and tired, as though our family's problems were a burden too great for him to handle. This was the moment everything collapsed, the moment the years of tension and unspoken rivalry burst into the open. Because it wasn't just a petty argument about who borrowed whose clothes or who took the car without permission. It was about the truth, about who had really put in the time, the work, and the heart. And it was about who was taking the credit. As usual, everyone believed Daphne, the golden child who never seemed to do any wrong in my parents' eyes. My name is Naomi Brooks, and I'm 28 years old. For as long as I can recall, my parents have favored Daphne, my 2 years younger sister. They'd never admit it outright, but it showed in every subtle gesture and every offhand comment, in the excuses they'd make for her failures and the silence they'd offer for my small successes. I spent my childhood trying to please them, earning good grades, tackling chores, never complaining about the hand-me-downs or the overlooked birthdays. I convinced myself that if I just worked harder, if I just proved my worth beyond any shadow of a doubt, they would finally see me as I wanted them to. And maybe it sounds pathetic. Maybe you think I should have walked away from their expectations long ago. But the truth is, we all crave acceptance from the people who raised us. We all want to know that we matter to them. So I stayed, quietly hoping that each step I took, each goal I achieved, would be the one that opened their eyes. Except each time I managed something worthwhile, Daphne found a way to overshadow it, or even to claim it as her own. I used to wonder if she did it on purpose. I told myself that maybe she didn't realize what she was doing. That maybe she just had a knack for being in the right place at the right time, or for saying the right words around our parents to make herself look good. But as I got older, I couldn't avoid the pattern. Something good would happen in my life, and Daphne would either snatch it away or diminish it with a shrug and a flip of her hair. It started with small things. I saved up money from babysitting to buy a new coat, and Daphne paraded around in it until she spilled hot chocolate down the front. I joined the volleyball team, and she showed up to a few practices, charming everyone just enough that no one noticed my hard work. I won a scholarship in high school for an art program, and she feigned interest in my sketches just enough that when she came home with a set of pricey art supplies, my parents praised her sudden creative ambition, ignoring my accomplishment in the process. But last year, things took a turn for the worse. I'd spent over a year developing a project at a local community center, organizing events for underprivileged kids. It was something I poured my heart into, countless hours scheduling volunteers, arranging donations, contacting local businesses. I didn't do it for recognition, but for the children, for the sense of purpose it gave me. Yet, when the project gained media attention and a local journalist wrote a feature about it, Daphne somehow became the face of it all. She'd popped by maybe 3 times, taken selfies with the kids, and posted them online, pretending she was a constant presence and caretaker. By the time the article went to print, she was featured in half the photographs, beaming and gracious, as though she were the mastermind behind the entire operation. And my parents, oh, how they glowed with pride when they read that piece. They told everyone about Daphne's altruism, about how she'd turned her compassion into action. Meanwhile, my name was an afterthought, tucked into a line about various volunteers who helped. It hurt. It made me feel small, like my efforts were invisible. But I swallowed it. I told myself that it didn't matter, that the work spoke for itself, and that the kids got what they needed in the end. I tried to let it go, but deep inside, a knot of resentment took root. Because it wasn't fair. Because she didn't just overshadow me, she lied, outright lied, about her involvement. Fast forward to this new crisis, the same pattern, multiplied tenfold. This time, it involved something far more personal, something that impacted not just me, but my future. I'd started freelancing as a graphic designer, taking on small commissions online, learning how to handle client feedback, how to market myself, how to keep up with the ever-shifting demands of the digital world. It was slow and underpaid at first, but I put everything into it. Late nights, constant study, meticulously building a portfolio that I hoped would open doors to bigger agencies. Over the months, I landed a significant contract, a chance to develop branding materials for a prominent local firm. It was my big break, the kind of project that could become a cornerstone in my portfolio and prove I was ready for large-scale work. I remember the night I got the confirmation email, how my heart pounded with excitement. I even told my parents about it the next day, in a rare moment of hope that maybe they'd finally see my dedication and be proud. They smiled politely, said, "That's wonderful," and promptly changed the subject to something about Daphne's new apartment downtown. I tried not to let it sting. The job was still mine. I told myself that was enough. But Daphne somehow caught wind of this contract. Maybe she overheard me telling a friend on the phone or saw an email open on my laptop. She asked a few casual questions about it. Nothing out of the ordinary, just, "Oh, who's the client? What kind of design work are you doing for them?" I didn't think it was suspicious at the time. I chalked it up to curiosity, even imagining she might be proud of me for once. But in retrospect, I should have recognized the gleam in her eye, that calculating look that always preceded trouble. She started dropping hints to our parents about how Naomi's design project might not go through because the client might be reconsidering. I had no idea why she was saying those things. I was in good standing with the firm, exchanging sketches and proposals daily. Then, a week later, she announced at a family dinner that she had been in talks with a major company to do some marketing consulting. She made it sound glamorous and significant, exactly the way my contract was. When pressed for details, she was evasive yet confident. My parents, of course, ate it up, praising her initiative and lauding her supposed business savvy. Meanwhile, I got an email from my client, stating they wanted to clarify some concerns that had apparently been raised by someone claiming to be my assistant. I had no assistant. No one else was working on this. I asked them for details, and they told me that a young woman named Daphne had contacted them with warnings about my track record, that I was inexperienced, that I might not deliver on time, that I had a history of missing deadlines, all lies. They expressed confusion, not knowing who to believe, but told me they were still open to working with me if I could confirm the actual situation. I was stunned. My own sister had reached out behind my back to sabotage me? Why? The answer was plain enough, so she could step in and offer her services, presumably. She knew I was close to finalizing the deal, so she planted seeds of doubt in the client's mind, hoping they'd cancel with me and pick her instead, or at least tarnish my name enough that I'd come out looking incompetent while she swept in as the rescuer. I confronted her in our parents' living room one evening when she was alone. I asked her point-blank what she had done and why. She feigned ignorance at first, blinking those wide eyes in faux innocence, insisting she had no idea what I was talking about. But I'd already spoken to the client by then, and I had the emails to prove her meddling. She tried a different tack, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, that she was trying to help me by pointing out potential weaknesses. So they'd be patient with you, so they wouldn't expect too much, she said, twisting the narrative around as if she were doing me a favor. I stood there in disbelief. Did she really think I was that gullible, or was she just that brazen? I felt the anger rising in me, the sense of betrayal churning in my gut. Stay out of my business, I warned her. This is my career, not some game you can tamper with. She shrugged, offering a sweet, condescending smile. I'm just looking out for you, she purred. Don't be so defensive. I wanted to scream at her, but I swallowed the fury, deciding it was better to keep calm, to gather more solid ground before confronting her fully. Over the next few days, I made it clear to my clients that Daphne had no involvement or authority to speak on my behalf. They apologized for the confusion and reaffirmed the contract. I felt a rush of relief, but also dread, because I knew Daphne wouldn't let it end so easily. And she didn't. She told our parents some convoluted story that I was blaming her for my lack of professionalism. She turned me into the villain, the ungrateful older sister who wouldn't accept help and lashed out over nothing. For a while, I tried to ignore it, to focus on delivering my design work. But then came the final blow. I discovered she'd been telling everyone, family, friends, distant relatives, even acquaintances in social gatherings, that she was the one who had secured the contract, that I was just her junior partner, riding on her coattails. The story grew more elaborate each time, painting her as the brains behind the project. Eventually, it reached my parents, who nodded along, beaming with pride, telling people how Daphne has landed a major deal and Naomi's helping her. And I felt my reality warp around me again, the same old pattern taking hold. Only this time, it was my livelihood, my name, and my reputation at stake. That sets the stage for why I found myself in the middle of the living room, with my mother's angry voice echoing off the walls, telling me not to steal my sister's success. She had reversed the entire situation, convinced them I was the one lying. She'd spun such a consistent web of half-truths and feigned hurt that by the time I tried to explain, it sounded to them like I was just bitterly lashing out. And so my mother, my own mother, was defending the person who'd lied, cheated, and slandered me behind my back. Don't you dare try to take away your sister's accomplishment, she had said, her voice trembling with anger. All you do is complain when she's finally finding her footing. I remember standing there, numb and trembling. Daphne was behind our mother, gazing at me with a sly, victorious smile. My father sat on the couch, brow furrowed, as if he wanted to say something but didn't know how. Or maybe he just didn't want the conflict. He never did. In that tense moment, I realized something. I was done playing the silent victim. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. My chest felt like it was on fire, but my voice was surprisingly steady. I'm not stealing anything, I said, looking directly at my mother. I just want you to hear the truth. My mother crossed her arms, glancing at Daphne, who pouted as though I were attacking her for no reason. Then tell me, Naomi. Because from what I understand, you've been nothing but difficult. I locked eyes with Daphne. She narrowed hers at me, a challenge passing between us. She didn't think I'd be brave enough to fight back, at least, not publicly. But I was. I was ready to shatter the illusions they'd so carefully built. I opened my mouth to speak, and that's where everything truly began. The aftermath of that confrontation was a storm of emotions, accusations, and misunderstandings. My mother was still too angry to listen. She demanded I apologize to Daphne, insisting I was causing a scene and ruining the family atmosphere. My father hovered near the edge, trying to offer a word or two of reason, but mostly staying silent. Daphne played the part of wounded innocence perfectly. She even managed a few tears, claiming she had never wanted any conflict, that all she wanted was to find success in her own way, and she was devastated that I couldn't be happy for her. I felt sick watching them console her. That pit in my stomach grew, the one that reminded me how easily my parents believed her tears over my facts. I knew that if I said anything else in that moment, it would sound like I was doubling down on an unprovoked attack. So I left. I walked out the front door, out into the brisk evening air, the weight of betrayal and disbelief pressing on my chest. Normally, after a blow-up like that, I would have driven to a friend's place, ranted for a few hours, maybe had a glass of wine, and then cried myself to sleep. But this was beyond normal. There was too much at stake: my work, my reputation, my sense of self. So I did something else. I drove to the office building where my client was based, parked in the empty lot, and sat alone in my car for almost an hour. I stared at the tall, reflective windows, shining under streetlights. I thought about how close I'd come to losing this contract thanks to Daphne's interference. How she had systematically tried to sabotage me, then twisted the story to her advantage. And I thought about how my parents, the people who were supposed to love and support me, had chosen to trust her instead of giving me the benefit of the doubt. Again, my phone buzzed with messages, some from my father, a few from a cousin who had heard a rumor that I'd accused Daphne of plagiarism, or something along those lines. I ignored them. I needed space to breathe and figure out my next move. Eventually, I went home, my own tiny apartment in a less glamorous part of town, tossed my bag onto the couch, and paced around the living room. My head was throbbing. The adrenaline from the confrontation made me jittery. I tried to gather my thoughts, to strategize about how to prove my truth in a family that refused to see it. I had emails, sketches, signed agreements with the client, hard evidence that I was the lead designer. That it was my contract, my negotiations, my creative vision. But my parents wouldn't even glance at them, not as long as Daphne was telling them a more appealing story. And that was the core of it, wasn't it? They liked Daphne's story better, the story of the bright, charming younger daughter finally finding her path, forging a professional future that validated all the favoritism they'd shown her. My story was messy, complicated by my frustration and sense of injustice. Who wants to listen to that when they can keep living in a fantasy where Daphne is the star? At some point, I realized I had to do more than just wave around documents. I had to confront Daphne in a way that left no room for her manipulations. I needed to record her, to catch her in her own lies, or find someone who had witnessed her sabotage. But was that too extreme? Would it make me look like the crazy one? The idea simmered in my mind, making me uneasy. I'd never stooped to something like that before, but the stakes had never been this high either. I slept poorly that night, dreams haunted by images of my sister in the spotlight, graciously accepting applause for something I'd created. Each time I tried to speak up in the dream, my voice vanished, as though I were screaming underwater. I woke up sweating, tears on my cheeks, the frustration as vivid as it had been when I was conscious. I decided I had to move forward with a plan. Step 1. Talk to the client in person. Step 2. Gather any communication that traced sabotage back to Daphne. Step 3. Present it to my parents in a setting where Daphne couldn't twist things. Maybe a public scenario, maybe a family gathering, so she couldn't run or claim I was ambushing her. I needed an ironclad approach. If I confronted her alone, she'd lie. If I confronted her with my parents, she'd cry. I needed a witness or multiple witnesses who could see the facts for themselves. An opportunity presented itself sooner than I expected. My aunt and uncle, who lived a couple of hours away, were hosting a family get-together that coming weekend. It was a chance for everyone to see each other, talk, share updates. I knew Daphne and my parents would be there, boasting about her new career. My father had texted me the location and time. Part of me wanted to skip it altogether to avoid more pain, but some sharper, more determined part said, "This is your chance. This is where you can lay everything out." So I prepared. I compiled a folder with copies of my contract, the correspondences with the client, a timeline of all the calls and meetings I'd had. I included screenshots of the messages where the client mentioned Daphne's warnings, tying it to her personal email. I didn't have everything I wanted, like an outright confession from her, but I had enough to build a compelling case. The day arrived, and I drove out to my aunt and uncle's place, a quaint house set off a long driveway, bordered by tall pines. My stomach fluttered with nerves the whole way. I was about to blow up my family dynamic, possibly beyond repair. But I told myself that the dynamic was already broken. Truthfully, it had been broken for a long time, shaped by lies and favoritism. Maybe the only way to fix it was to tear it all down and see what remained. When I stepped inside, the aroma of homemade lasagna and fresh bread greeted me. Relatives were scattered in the living room and kitchen, chatting, laughing, sipping wine. My mother was there, wearing her usual polite hostess smile, while my father spoke to an uncle about some yard project. Daphne was at the center of a small circle of cousins, evidently in the midst of an animated story. I hovered by the doorway, my heart pounding. Then I steadied myself, set my shoulders, and walked further in. Daphne spotted me. Her expression shifted almost imperceptibly, annoyance flickered, then she pasted on a bright smile. "Naomi," she called, too cheerfully. "So glad you made it." I forced a similar smile. "Wouldn't miss it," I said, my voice tight. I could feel my mother's eyes flick toward me, her gaze careful. She had to be wondering if I was about to cause a scene. My father took note of my presence, gave a small nod, then resumed his conversation, clearly avoiding direct engagement. I mingled politely for a while, greeting relatives, making small talk. The tension in my chest didn't ease. I kept looking for the right moment to bring out my folder to say, I have something I need to share. But I was also dreading it. It felt like stepping off a cliff. Daphne, meanwhile, was doing her usual performance, charming the aunts with tales of her supposed new responsibilities, how she was designing branding for a major client, how tough but rewarding it was. I overheard snatches of conversation. Yes, it's a challenge, but I'm a perfectionist. I want to make sure the client is satisfied, and it's such a big opportunity, you know. Naomi's helping me a bit, but I'm basically leading the creative direction. My blood boiled. Finally, dinner was served. We all gathered around the large dining table that barely fit everyone. Plates were passed around, drinks poured. Toasts were made, usually praising the host, my aunt and uncle, for their hospitality. Then someone, my cousin, I think, brought up the topic of jobs. They asked me how I was doing, and I started to answer honestly about my design work. But before I could get past the first sentence, Daphne interrupted me to share how excited she was about her role with the local firm. She even named my client. I froze mid-breath. She was naming them as if they had specifically hired her, describing the timeline, the deliverables, everything that was actually my job. I caught my aunt's eye. She looked a bit confused, maybe noticing the tension in my face. Others were nodding along, praising Daphne's drive. My father beamed at her, my mother wore that look of paternal pride. And I realized that the moment was now. I couldn't listen to one more minute of her rewriting history. I cleared my throat. "Daphne," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I have some questions about this project you keep mentioning. The one with Redwood Solutions, right?" Redwood Solutions was indeed my client. She glanced at me coolly. "Oh, Naomi, you know I can't talk about confidential details." She gave a laugh that was supposed to sound lighthearted, but there was an edge to it. "Really?" I pressed. Because I thought I could. I reached down and pulled the folder from my bag, setting it on the table. A hush fell. Eyes flicked between Daphne and me, uncertain. This was a family dinner. After all, no one expected an official confrontation. My heart hammered, but I pushed forward. "You see, Redwood Solutions is my client. I have the contract here in my name, my communications with them, everything. They hired me as their lead designer a few weeks ago." Silence. Then a few confused murmurs. Daphne's cheeks flushed. She tried to laugh it off. Yes, well, we're kind of co-leads, Naomi. I told them about you, that you'd be helping with the technical side while I handle the bigger vision." I calmly opened the folder, took out a copy of the contract. According to Redwood's documentation and their own words, they don't know you at all, Daphne. They never hired you, and they certainly never discussed a co-lead arrangement. Her jaw tightened. That's because they're used to dealing with you, but I've been consulting with them privately, she said. They have different channels they use for that. My mother frowned, looking at me. Naomi, what is all this? She asked, clearly hoping I'd drop it. We're here to enjoy a meal, not to talk business. That was it. That was the shutting down tactic I'd faced for years. But not today. I'd love to, Mom, but I'm done letting Daphne create a false impression. She's been telling you all that she's leading this big contract, and I'm just helping. That's not true. My father sighed, rubbing his forehead. Naomi, why would she lie about that? I stared straight at Daphne. Her face was growing pale, her eyes darting around, looking for an escape. Maybe because she wants the credit for something she didn't earn, I said. It wouldn't be the first time. My mother shot me a warning look. Naomi, that's enough. It's not enough, I said quietly. I reached for the second set of documents, screenshots of the emails Redwood Solutions had sent me, referencing the messages they received from my assistant, named Daphne, who cast doubts on my reliability. I placed them on the table. This is evidence that Daphne tried to sabotage me with Redwood Solutions. She told them I was inexperienced, that I missed deadlines. She did it so they'd question my competence. Then she slid in, hoping they'd hire her. A few of my relatives gasped or muttered something. My aunt leaned forward, peering at the papers. My uncle asked, "Is this real, Naomi? Are these actual emails?" "Yes," I said firmly. They came directly from Redwood. They forwarded them to me because they were confused. They wanted to make sure everything was legitimate on my end. My father grabbed the papers, scanning them. He went pale. Daphne, what is this? Daphne opened her mouth, closed it, then managed a faint laugh. Dad, you know how easy it is to fake emails. Naomi could have. Don't even try, I said, feeling my own anger surge. I can give you the Redwood manager's number and you can call to confirm. I've already talked to them, and they're prepared to verify everything in those emails. Somewhere in the background, a cousin whispered, "Oh my God," under her breath. Others exchanged uneasy glances. This was the moment I'd never dared to believe could happen, the slow fracturing of Daphne's perfect mask. She looked cornered, her eyes darting back and forth. My mother inhaled sharply, turning to her beloved younger daughter. Daphne, this isn't. You wouldn't. She trailed off, her voice thick with confusion. Why would you do that to your sister? Tension crackled in the air. Daphne tried to summon tears. She sniffed, her voice trembling in a well-practiced victim tone. I was only trying to look out for her. I thought Redwood might be too big for her. I was afraid she'd fail and get hurt. So I reached out to see if they'd consider me as well, in case Naomi couldn't handle it. She let a few tears fall, looking around at the table. I never meant to sabotage her. I just wanted to make sure they didn't judge her too harshly. Maybe I said some things I shouldn't have, but I was worried. Worried? I repeated, stunned by her audacity. You told them I was unprofessional and irresponsible. You called yourself my assistant, and you implied you were the real brain behind the designs. That's not worry, that's sabotage. She pressed her lips together, ignoring me and turning her tearful gaze to my parents instead. Mom, Dad, you know me. You know I wouldn't do something so cruel on purpose. I just didn't want Naomi to get in over her head. Then I thought, if Redwood needed more help, maybe I could step in. It was a misunderstanding. I could see my mother's resolve wavering. She had a lifelong habit of wanting to believe the best of Daphne. My father looked torn, holding the papers that implicated her in his hands. The rest of the family was silent, shifting uncomfortably in their seats. It was like watching a drama unfold on a stage, and I realized how precarious the outcome was. If they sided with her, I'd be left looking like the antagonist again. So I took a deep breath, reached into the folder one last time, and pulled out a phone. I opened my voice memos. The night I confronted Daphne about Redwood's confusion, I'd had the presence of mind to record part of our conversation, just in case. It was short and perhaps not a smoking gun, but enough to reveal her intentions. "Let's listen to something," I said, pressing play. Through the tiny speaker, my recorded voice asked, "Why would you even tell them I can't handle it? Do you realize how damaging that is?" Then Daphne's voice came through, sharp and annoyed. "Relax, Naomi. This is business. If they doubt you, they'll look for someone else. You think Redwood is going to waste time on someone who hasn't proven herself?" She laughed, a cold sound. "I'm just making sure I get my foot in the door in case you mess up. It's called strategy." I paused the recording, letting the silence ring. Daphne's face was a mix of fury and embarrassment. She opened her mouth to protest again, but my father's voice cut through the tension. "Enough," he said, looking up from the email printouts. He turned to her, face grim. "That's you. Admitting you tried to undermine your sister." Daphne's eyes filled with tears, but for once, they didn't look genuine. She sputtered, "Dad, My mother closed her eyes, exhaling shakily. "Daphne," she whispered, "is this true?" And just like that, it was over. Her carefully planned deceit had unraveled under real evidence. The color drained from her cheeks, and she looked small, vulnerable. For a fleeting second, I felt almost sorry for her. Almost. She stared at the table, then stood abruptly. "I don't have to listen to this," she muttered. With that, she brushed past me and fled the room, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. A thick silence remained, so oppressive that I felt like I could hardly breathe. My father set the papers down, ran a hand over his face. My mother's eyes were wet with tears, confusion, and betrayal. No one spoke for a long time. I wanted to say something that would salvage the moment, maybe reassure them that this was necessary, that I hadn't wanted to humiliate Daphne, only to reveal the truth. But words escaped me. My mother stood up first, muttering that she needed a moment, and followed the path Daphne had taken. My father lingered, glancing at me once before softly saying, "I'm sorry." Then he, too, walked off. That left me, a half-eaten dinner, and a table of relatives who had witnessed the unmasking of my sister's lies. No one seemed to know what to do. I felt numb, like I was watching it all from a distance. Part of me was relieved, finally, the truth was out. Part of me was terrified, had I just destroyed my relationship with my family beyond repair? Eventually, people began to gather their things. My cousin patted my shoulder, telling me to stay strong. My aunt offered me a sad smile. My uncle avoided my gaze, probably unsure where his loyalties should lie. Within half an hour, the gathering was effectively over, as though a bomb had gone off in the middle of it. I stepped outside for fresh air, my hands shaking. I told myself it was done. The evidence had been laid out, the confrontation had happened. But the aftermath was just beginning. It wasn't until I got back to my apartment that night that it really sank in. I'd spent my entire life yearning for my parents to see me, to actually see me for what I could do, for who I was. And in one tumultuous evening, I'd ripped away the illusions that made them feel safe about Daphne. Now they had to face the reality that their younger daughter was manipulative, selfish, and willing to sabotage her own sister. I didn't know how they'd handle that knowledge or if they'd find some way to rationalize it away. I paced my living room, glancing at my phone every few minutes, wondering if they'd call. If Daphne would call. If I'd get any reaction besides the shock and apology my father had muttered. Around midnight, I texted him, a simple, "Are you okay?" just to break the silence. He replied an hour later, saying, "We're talking to Daphne. Let's discuss everything tomorrow." I wasn't sure if that was good or bad, but at least it was something. I sank onto my couch, knees drawn up to my chest, replaying every moment of the night. The adrenaline was still coursing through me, making it impossible to rest. I kept hearing Daphne's laugh on the recording, that cold cynicism as she justified undermining me. It hurt more than I'd expected to realize she truly had no remorse, that she valued her own image above our sibling bond. My phone buzzed again, startling me. Expecting it to be my father, I checked the screen. To my surprise, it was Daphne herself. One text, only 5 words. "How could you do this?" I stared at it, my heart pounding. How could I do this? After everything she had done, she was asking me how I could expose her? I shook my head in disbelief. She sounded more betrayed by my honesty than remorseful for her deceit. I typed a response, then deleted it. Typed another, deleted that too. There was nothing I could say that would fix this moment. Her question made no sense to me, and I doubted anything I said would matter to her in her current state. So I left it unanswered, turned my phone to silent, and forced myself to lie down. Sleep came fitfully in fragments, haunted by a sense of deep loss, despite my small triumph. Because that's what it felt like, a loss. I had wanted justice, and I'd gotten it, sort of. But the price might be permanent damage to my family ties. I'd never had a perfect relationship with them, but I'd clung to hope that it could get better. Now, I wasn't so sure. Maybe the truth sets you free, but it also tears apart everything built on lies. The next morning, I woke to a gray sky and the sound of rain pattering against my window. It fit my mood perfectly. I dragged myself out of bed, checked my phone. A missed call from my mother and a voicemail. My stomach knotted. I listened, bracing for anger, for more accusations. But she sounded tired, subdued. "Naomi," her voice said softly, "I need to speak with you. Please call me back when you can. I'm not sure how to handle all this. Your sister's upset, your father is. Just call me." There was a pause, then a sigh. "I'm sorry." I sat there for a moment, letting the apology sink in. She was sorry. For what, exactly? For the confrontation, for the favoritism, or just for the uncomfortable position I'd put them in? I debated whether to call her right back or wait. Ultimately, curiosity and a need for closure pushed me to dial her number. She answered on the second ring. "Naomi?" "Yes, Mom." "Hi." She hesitated, then spoke in a subdued tone. "I'm at home. Your father's at work and Daphne's, well, she left earlier. She's not taking my calls. Could you come over? We need to talk face to face." I felt a surge of anxiety. I wasn't sure I could handle another heated argument. But I heard the plea in her voice. "Okay," I said quietly. "I'll come." An hour later, I pulled into my parents' driveway. The rain had intensified, making the world look dark and washed out. I made my way up the steps, recalling how many times I'd approached this house feeling apprehensive. This time was different. Something fundamental had shifted. Mom opened the door before I could knock. She looked disheveled, eyes puffy like she'd been crying. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. I made tea. I followed her to the kitchen. Familiar sights and smells greeted me, but they felt distant, like artifacts from a time when I still believed my family could be normal. We sat at the table, the same place where we'd had countless dinners, though always overshadowed by conversation dominated by Daphne. "I spoke to your father," she began. Her hands trembled slightly around her mug. "He's upset. Not at you. At Daphne, at himself, at me, at everything. I never realized," her voice caught. "I never realized she'd do something so underhanded." I said nothing, letting her process. She swallowed, tears gathering in her eyes. "I'm sorry I didn't listen to you. I'm sorry I dismissed what you were trying to say. I see now that she broke off, taking a shaky breath. "We've been easier on Daphne her whole life, and I always told myself it was just because she needed more guidance, but I guess we were enabling her." A swirl of emotions churned in me. Anger, relief, a lingering bitterness. "I tried to tell you," I said softly. "But you and Dad, you just never believed me." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. I know. I know. It's just, she always seemed so fragile, and you were always so strong and independent. I guess I thought you didn't need as much support. I never realized how unfair that was. I felt a pang in my chest at the mention of me being so strong. It was a myth I'd never asked to perpetuate. Yes, I was resilient out of necessity, but it didn't mean I never needed help or care. She's not fragile, I said, my voice tight. She's manipulative. She knows exactly how to play people. My mother winced, wiping her cheeks with the back of her hand. I can't defend her anymore. Your father says he wants her to apologize, to admit what she's done. But she stormed out this morning, saying we've all turned against her. She exhaled shakily, looking older than I ever remembered. I don't know what to do, Naomi. I paused, considering. Part of me wanted to say, that's not my problem, but I couldn't. She was still my mother, and beneath my anger and resentment, I felt a tug of compassion. You need to set boundaries with her, I said carefully. Don't let her keep spinning her lies. If she wants a relationship with you and Dad, she has to be honest. She nodded slowly. You're right. But I'm worried about her, about how she'll handle this. She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. You do believe I love you, don't you? Even if I haven't shown it well? My throat tightened. That question, the validation I'd sought all my life. I swallowed. I believe you love me in your way, I said, my voice unsteady. But sometimes it felt like you loved Daphne more. Or differently. And it hurt. She reached out, hesitantly, and I let her take my hand. I'm sorry, she whispered. I can't change the past, but I promise I'll try to do better from now on. I squeezed her hand, not sure if I was ready to fully forgive, but at least acknowledging the moment of honesty. We stayed there for a while, sipping lukewarm tea in silence, the tension still present, but softened by a shared sense of regret. Eventually, I stood to leave. My mother walked me to the door, reminding me that we'd talk again soon, that she'd keep me updated on Dad's thoughts and whether Daphne came home. I nodded, stepping out into the rain, feeling both drained and oddly lighter. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was the first time she'd confronted the truth of Daphne's behavior instead of denying it outright. I heard nothing from Daphne for the next 2 weeks. My father called me a couple of times, telling me he supported me, though he sounded uncertain how to handle Daphne's fury. She had blocked me on social media, apparently, and told my parents she was staying with a friend. She refused to meet with them unless they apologized for humiliating her in front of the family. Meanwhile, I poured my energy into my design work. Redwood Solutions was pleased with my progress, and ironically, the scandal had spurred me to prove myself even more. I was determined to deliver exceptional results. If nothing else, I'd walk away from this with a solid piece for my portfolio and a sense of professional pride that was undeniable. Whenever doubts crept in, or guilt about the family rift, I reminded myself that Daphne had taken the first shot by undermining me. I had only exposed her lies. Word spread among relatives, of course. Some called to say they'd had no idea Daphne was that manipulative, expressing sympathy. Others tried to remain neutral, not wanting to pick sides. A few even hinted that I should have kept the matter private, that family business shouldn't be aired publicly. But I stood by my actions. The truth needed to come out, and secrecy would only keep me trapped in the role of the overshadowed, discredited older sister. One evening, out of the blue, I got a text from Daphne. It read, "Can we talk?" I stared at it for a good 5 minutes, torn between curiosity and dread. Part of me wanted to ignore her the way she'd ignored my honest attempts to communicate. But another part, maybe the naive part that still hoped for some resolution, replied with a single word. Okay. She showed up at my apartment an hour later. Rain again drizzled outside, as if the weather had taken on a permanent mood of gloom during this ordeal. She knocked softly, and when I opened the door, I hardly recognized the woman standing there. She looked disheveled, her hair pulled into a messy bun, eyes red from crying. Gone was the polished, confident swagger I was used to. She stepped in without waiting for an invitation, standing awkwardly in my living room. "I'm not here to apologize," she said, her tone defensive from the get-go. "But I think we need to sort out some kind of truce." I folded my arms. "A truce?" "Yes," she said, letting out a shaky breath. "You made me look like a liar in front of everyone. Now Mom and Dad treat me like a problem child. I can't even go home without them demanding I tell the truth and beg your forgiveness." Her eyes flashed with resentment. "You've ruined everything." "I ruined everything?" I repeated, astounded. "Daphne, you tried to steal my work and sabotage me. You lied to our parents about it. What did you expect?" She flinched slightly, but then her features hardened. "You didn't have to humiliate me in front of the entire family. You could have talked to me privately." "I did talk to you privately," I shot back, my voice rising. "You brushed me off, gaslit me, and kept lying. Did you think I'd just roll over and let you take credit for my career?" She stared at the floor. "Whatever," she muttered. "I just want things back the way they were. I want Mom and Dad off my back. You have your precious contract. Why can't we just move on?" My anger flared. I took a slow breath, reminding myself not to explode. "Because moving on without acknowledging the damage you've done is just enabling you. I'm tired of you walking all over me, stealing what's mine, and expecting me to pretend it never happened." She looked up at me, desperation flickering across her face. "I don't know what to say, Naomi. I messed up, but I can't be the bad guy forever." Her eyes watered, and I realized these tears might actually be genuine. I never wanted to lose my family support. It just spiraled. I sighed, feeling a twinge of sympathy. "Maybe if you apologized, if you showed some genuine regret." "Fine," she snapped. "I'm sorry. Is that what you want to hear?" "That sounded forced," I said softly. "I want to believe you can be better, but I'm not sure you even think you did something wrong. You're just sorry you got caught." She pressed her lips together, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You're right," she admitted in a trembling whisper. "I hate being second best. I hate seeing you do well while I struggle. I want to be seen as successful too, okay?" I felt a pang of hurt. "Daphne, you could be successful on your own terms, without tearing me down. But you chose to sabotage me." She shook her head, wiping her cheeks. "You don't get it. Mom and Dad always say how you're so hardworking and responsible, even if they don't always praise you. I feel like a failure next to you. So I figured if I could just show them I was capable of something big." "I don't know." She trailed off, her voice thick with emotion. I swallowed a lump in my throat, realizing we both had twisted perceptions. "We're sisters," I said softly. "We should be supporting each other, not tearing each other apart. But I can't trust you anymore. Do you understand that?" She nodded, lowering her gaze. "Yeah, I do." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, she took a shaky breath. I'll try to fix things with Mom and Dad. And I'll tell them the truth, that you were the one who got the contract first." I studied her face, cautious hope stirring. "If you do that, it might help. But don't expect things to go back to normal overnight." She nodded, then turned to the door. Before leaving, she looked over her shoulder. "I'm not proud of what I did," she said quietly. I guess I thought it was the only way I'd ever catch up to you." She left before I could reply. I sank onto the couch, an odd mix of relief and sadness washing over me. Part of me was glad she'd admitted some guilt. Another part worried that this was just another manipulation. Either way, we'd crossed a threshold. There was no easy path back. The real shift, though, happened within. I realized I no longer craved my parents' approval the way I once did. Standing up for myself, exposing the truth, showed me I didn't need them to define my worth. Yes, it still hurt that they'd been so blind to my struggles. But I felt freer, knowing I could define my own path without bending over backward for their praise. On a personal level, I felt stronger. I realized I didn't need to keep silent to maintain a fragile peace. My voice mattered, and standing up for myself had finally forced my family to confront the truth. It was painful, but it was also necessary. I learned that the cost of suppressing myself was far higher than the discomfort of conflict. Sometimes I still feel a pang of sadness for the years lost, the times I'd been shoved into Daphne's shadow. But I've let the bitterness fade. Now I focus on what I've gained: a clearer sense of self, a blossoming career, and the potential, just the potential, for a family dynamic that isn't built on lies and favoritism. Not a perfect ending, maybe, but a real one. And that's enough.